Lois and Peter Griffin are one of our favorite TV couples ever. They seem to be a perfect match in sense of humor, questionable parenting styles, and complete depravity. But sometimes their marriage is just too weird for words, and we really wonder why these two stay together, or how they even managed to get paired up in the first place. While you're here, why not take a second to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell? It'll help you stay up to date with all the latest from ScreenRant. Alright, so not everything is about looks, and it shouldn't be. But come on! The discrepancy between Lois and Peter's hotness has been a recurring gag since the show started, and one that has never been resolved. While it's definitely a play on the classic sitcom trope of pretty average-looking husband with a super hot wife, looking at you, King of Queens, and every other family sitcom ever made, it is a known fact that a ton of men in Quahog would drop everything to be with Lois, but the heart wants what it wants. While still on the point that maybe Lois could have done a little better, we can't forget the fact that she is totally and completely loaded, or at least her family is. The Pewterschmidt family are notoriously worth somewhere around hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet it really says something about Lois that she really wants nothing to do with the money. Peter, on the other hand, definitely does. He almost married Chris for his inheritance once, which is a seriously creepy length to go to secure the family fortune. On the other hand, Peter has been pretty understanding over their many years of marriage about the fact that Lois has cheated and almost cheated on him more than once. Quite a lot, actually. She stole Meg's boyfriend, got with Bill Clinton, tried to seduce Justin Bieber, almost slept with Quagmire when Peter lost his memory, and the list goes on. For all of his insane shenanigans, Peter has actually been pretty chill about it all, and always forgives her for it in the end. Perhaps all of their willingness to forgive each other is out of love, and maybe some of it is just to stay together for the kids, which might make sense if they seem to like their kids even a little. We all know Meg is the punching bag for the entire family, so clearly Peter and Lois don't really care about her all that much. And while they do seem to love Chris and Stewie a little more, they're still totally irresponsible around both of them, and even border on abusive. Speaking of Stewie, how did these two people somehow manage to create a super genius? Well, Meg actually seems pretty smart, and Chris, Stewie is clearly in a league of his own, which is something of a miracle. Some wondered for years if Peter wasn't his biological father, but that was disproven in the episode Chap Stewie, when Stewie prevents his own birth by breaking Lois and Peter up. Whatever the reason, third time was the charm, and somehow these two managed to create the smartest baby in the world. So we know Lois had a very privileged upbringing, and she did pretty much everything she could to rebel against it. Her biggest rebellion? Marrying Peter. It is well documented that her dad Carter totally loathes Peter, and even though he did come around and eventually give Peter his blessing, it's still pretty clear that one of the reasons that Lois fell so hard for Peter is because her dad hated him. And yet, even though that might have been her initial reason, they remain married after all these years. So despite all of her parents' wealth, Lois really has adamantly rejected their help for her own family, for better or for worse. There's no doubt things would be a little easier if she did accept money from her parents, because clearly, Peter doesn't make enough at his job. When Stewie's big wheel is stolen, Peter even mentions he still had 6 installments to pay on it. While their money situation is definitely a running gag, it is a little troubling for sure. And because we're not quite over the subject of their finances yet, what happened to Lois's job? In the early season, she used to teach piano lessons, and has had a few odd jobs here and there when the family was in trouble. But seriously, can't she hold one down? Meg and Chris are teenagers in school, and Stewie is in full-time daycare. She's got time to at least get something part-time and help out a little, maybe even pay off that big wheel once and for all. One last thing about the money, we promise. So we've covered the fact that Lois may have married Peter to spite her father. But what about Peter's motivations for marrying Lois? While she is, of course, very beautiful and the two share a twisted sense of humor, it has seemed like on more than one occasion that her family's money is really important to Peter. Again, he almost married his own son for it. So it's not so much of a stretch to imagine that Peter actually married Lois for her father's money. Moving on to another member of the family, Brian. It is an open secret now amongst all of the Griffins that Brian is harboring a deep, intense desire for Lois, and Peter is just beyond cool about it. It is kinda sweet that Peter doesn't kick him out for being in love with his wife, but it's also a little odd that he hasn't. Sure, everyone is a little in love with Lois, but Brian lives in their house and sleeps at the foot of their bed. Isn't this weird for anyone? Just me? We get it. Lois is hot. Everyone knows this, and boy does everyone seem to act on it. Another friendship that really seems to get in the way of their marriage is Peter's friendship with Quagmire. Not only is Quagmire totally obsessed with Lois, but he acts on it too. He seduces her when Peter loses his memory, and they even get married in an alternate timeline. It's a little funny how Peter stays so close with a man who actively pursues his wife. But then again, who else but Quagmire? Peter and Lois fight more than any couple we know, on TV or otherwise. And not just bickering either. These two totally wail on each other, and have done so more than once. From the full family brawl in Lethal Weapons to the time when Stewie and Peter gang up to torment Lois by attacking her with a hose, smashing a jar on her head, and almost drown her in the trunk of her car in the courtship of Stewie's father, these two really let each other have it. While we know the three Griffin children really well, there's been more than one occasion on the show where a line or two has slipped in about some mysterious other children that Lois and Peter have had. Peter has mentioned an older brother who died who was good at sports and talking, Peter Jr., who died after being shaken by Peter, another sister that Meg supposedly killed, and a twin of Stewie's named Dave, who Stewie killed in the womb. While most of these were throwaway gags, they're pretty dark ones. While we have said Peter has been very understanding of Lois's extramarital adventures, we really can't forget the Bill Clinton episode. Not only does Lois sleep with him, but in an agreement that Peter can step out with someone of his choice, Peter chooses Lois's mom? Hey, Bill Clinton was a smooth guy in his day, but wanting to have revenge sex with your mother-in-law is a whole other ballgame. And Babs even agreed to it. Thank God they didn't end up going through with it. Not only have they had some really weird casual encounters outside their marriage, but Lois actually went so far as to marry Brian. To be fair, it only happened after Peter became lost at sea and was presumed dead by everyone for quite a while first. But Brian? And then, even after Peter and Lois can't stay away from each other and Brian gracefully bows out, he continues to live with them. Weirder still, the family actually seemed a lot more well-adjusted with Brian doing the parenting rather than Peter. We've covered the emotional instability of Lois and Peter's marriage so far, but there is actually one other huge physical consequence that no one seems to even remember, and that's that Peter literally gave Lois a brain tumor. In Season 4, after a particularly grueling Peter episode, Brian asks Lois if their marriage stresses her out at all. She says that it doesn't, because she simply represses everything. They then cut to the inside of her head, where a Peter-shaped brain tumor dances around singing, I'm a tumor, healthy. While she maybe isn't the most exciting person in the world, the family's overall hatred for Meg is pretty extreme, and there might actually be a reason why, though it isn't even a good one. Peter might not actually be Meg's father, as we learn in Season 3. There's a throwaway line in which Brian says that Meg's real father is a man named Stan Thompson. Meg doesn't actually hear this, and no one mentions it again. But perhaps it's a clue as to why Peter doesn't treat her like a daughter. And we know that the who can understand Stewie thing has been discussed to no end, and shouldn't really be taken that seriously and just allowed to go in and out as the plot requires, but come on! Can they understand him? It's most obvious that Lois can't, as she would probably be much more afraid for her life than she seems to be, but sometimes it seems like Peter can actually carry a conversation with them. To that end, do they notice that he's British? What the deuce indeed. In the episode April and Quahog, we really learn the extent of Peter's dislike for his family. The episode centers around an announcement that the apocalypse is about to hit in 24 hours, and everyone embarks on a mission to live their last hours to the fullest. But at the very last moment, when everyone believes that the world will come to an end, Peter just confesses that he hates spending time with his children. And then, nothing happens. The whole thing is revealed to have been a prank, but Peter can't undrop that bomb. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois on the show, has come out to say that Lois loves to be the smartest one in the room, which isn't really that much of a surprise. And possibly that's one of the things that she really loves about Peter, and one of the weirdly perfect ways their marriage stays afloat. While it might seem odd to want to constantly be correcting your spouse, Peter leaves Lois no shortage of opportunities to do so, and she definitely takes advantage of them. If not for the happiness, and if not because they actually love each other, then why are Lois and Peter continuing to stay together? Well, they outright address it in a later episode. Lying in the dark, Peter asks Lois if other families fight as much as they do. Lois replies no, and when Peter starts to ask if they should consider a divorce, she tells him that it is what it is and they'll deal with it when Stewie gets to college. Now that's dark. Seriously, even spending some time at a romantic cabin getaway isn't an all-around good time for the Griffins, as we saw in the episode Nanny Goats. When they get a nanny for the kids, Peter and Lois eventually have time to be together, and they really do have fun for the week. But when they discover they drunkenly planned a weekend away, it becomes too much of a good thing and the two fight the entire time. They even agree to get a divorce when they come home, but of course, they don't. Peter and Lois aren't together for lack of trying, though. But even when they've sought marriage counseling, things go classically awry. The first time is in the early seasons, when they give a marriage counseling video a try and Peter gets hooked on the sexy brunette woman in the video. And again when the two attend a couple's counseling retreat with their friends, and Peter finds he actually has a lot more in common with Quagmire's new girlfriend. They do eventually admit their love, but only after they're held at gunpoint. For all of their differences, the thing keeping Lois and Peter together is their shared twisted sense of humor. For every fight they've had the same amount of moments where they've laughed at Meg's expense, or smoked weed together and tried to form a folk duo and laying naked on a couch, or laughed at Brian's humiliation, or even criticized their baby's art. Despite everything that might tear them apart, they can always find something or someone to laugh at together. Perhaps the strangest thing of all about Lois and Peter is that no matter how crazy things get, and how much they seem to actually despise each other, is that the pair always seem to forgive each other no matter what. It's one of the best things about them, that even though Peter might spend all their money, and Lois might sleep with someone else, they will always come together again in the end. So maybe it doesn't make sense, but Lois and Peter might actually have a stronger marriage than a lot of us. Whew! So what do you think about Lois and Peter's marriage? Do you think the pair should stay together, or that everyone would be better off if they split up? Would you marry a man like Peter or a woman like Lois? Let us know in the comments. And make sure to subscribe to ScreenRant to keep up to date with all of our latest content. Thanks for watching!